My name is Lisa Mascola. I have the privilege of leading our IBM services business in the federal, state, and local market. It's a role that I really relish. I have spent all of my close to 38 years in this space in the public service business. I occasionally threaten about going inside. I haven't quite done that yet. I think the opportunity that we have jointly on the inside and the outside to really make a difference in this country for our clients is what really is most important, and frankly, it is what gets most of my team out of bed every day to serve. I thought the first panel was great, and when I think about the center and the impact that it's had, not only as a result of the body of knowledge and the body of work that's put together, but really it results from the sort of pushy, provocative questions that have been asked over the years. It really does, I think, help to drive the agenda forward. So I'm really pleased and proud to be part of the Center for the Business of Government. I spent about 30 years at Accenture, and it frankly was one of the things I was most jealous of, was the center. Because it has always been viewed as an independent body that was focused on making a difference. So I love that. And the thing for the first panel, and I'll be really interested to hear from our second panel, obviously, what really strikes me is the data point. Clearly, the future of our clients and our clients' clients is about the data and the power of the data, and it really is about the opportunity to turn that data into some information, into knowledge, and ultimately into insight. And it's the analytics and the tools around that that actually are going to let us drive from data to insight. I often think that we have so much data. There's tons and tons and tons of data. I actually think it must have some weight. I mean, I guess I know it doesn't. But there's so much data that we have, and our challenge really as partners with governments is to help you drive the insight out of that data. And I think one of the things that we do have to do very differently, if we're going to harness that power, is to figure out our procurement system of the future. I think all the things that we talked about on the last panel with respect to getting to the future need to be harnessed through procurement. I love the idea, frankly, as a taxpayer, I don't mind. I'm not in love with LPTA. As a taxpayer, I love LP. I think the government should pay less, but I think we ought to focus on LPTE. I'd love low price technically exceptional. And our challenge is to figure out how to define technically exceptional. I think we should, in government, pay the lowest price for what is technically exceptional. I think that's a part of the future. And then actually, how do you put all that together? Well, you put all that together with the workforce. And it is about the workforce, both in the private sector that helps government and in government, that we kind of need to reskill and get skilled for the future. And I think when we put together the data, the procurement, and workforce of the future, we'll really have something. So I'm really excited about this panel. For me, having been a geek on the outside of government, it's fascinating that what we have here before us today are people who have crossed 4 administrations. That is no small feat. And it's testament also to the center, right, and the center's ability to convene, which I think is hugely important. So we have with us today Sally Katzen. Sally served in the Clinton administration as administrator for the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in OMB, as Deputy Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, and Deputy Director of the National Economic Council in the White House, and then as Deputy Director for Management at OMB. Clay Johnson was the Deputy Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget. Previously, he was Assistant to the President for Presidential Personnel. Clay worked with Governor Bush in Austin as his Appointments Director, Chief of Staff, and Executive Director of the Bush-Cheney transition. Andrew Mayock was the Deputy Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget under President Obama. Previously, he was Deputy Vice President at the Millennium Challenge Corp., Executive Secretary of the Treasury Department, and Senior Advisor to the White House's Director of Public Liaison. Margaret Weichert currently serves as Deputy Director for Management at the Office of Management and Budget, and now Acting Director of the Office of Personnel Management. Previously, Ms. Weichert served as a principal at Ernst & Young. She also held executive leadership positions at the Bank of America and Anderson Consulting. Thank you all for being here. Let me turn it over, Jonathan, to you to kick off this panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Lisa. This panel is really going to be kind of a treat for everybody because these are the leaders of the management improvement efforts for the past administrations, and we've got them here for our discussion this afternoon. We're not going to be talking about war stories, about what they did when they were in office. That was then. But we are going to be looking at the future, and we want them to draw upon their experience as deputy directors and to discuss what were the most significant government management improvement initiatives they undertook, and most importantly, what were the lessons that they would have us here for future leaders. So I'm going to start with Sally Katzen, starting with the Clinton administration.
Oldies but goodies, right.
And Sally, what was your one accomplishment that you're most proud of, given the many opportunities and many challenges ahead that you addressed? What does it teach future deputy directors for management and other management leaders about how they can best shape the future?
Well, first I'd like to thank you for assembling this group and for the work that the center has done. It started in 1998, which was the year that I became DDM. So there's a nice nexus there. My best accomplishment, I can't answer that because I don't think I did anything. I really, what I found as DDM was that the staff at OMB was even better than its reputation. That the people there had the expertise and experience and the good judgment and the backbone to tell me what I needed to do and how to do it and what mistakes I should avoid. So I don't really want to take credit for anything that happened. Dan was there at the time, Jonathan was there at the time, there were lots of others who may be in the audience that I haven't seen. But the credit goes to you. What I think was our best accomplishment from that era was that we pushed the boundaries of collegiality and collaboration at a time when it sorely needed it. I noticed during the first panel there were repeated references to government in the singular. It. That's not the case. Government is highly siloed. Government is highly fractionated. There are lots of different agencies. There are lots of different functions within agencies. And so one of the things that we did was create the CIO Council, which Darrell had referenced in the first panel. That was the Chief Information Officers Council. There was also a Chief Financial Officers Council, and there was a Chief Procurement Officers Council, and there was the IG's Council. I spent most of my time scheduling and going to and following up from meetings of people from a number of different departments and agencies. And then we created a Council of Councils, the Quad Council, that brought the different functions together. Now, to me, this made brilliant sense for a number of reasons. One, it knocked down the silos, and people were able to share best practices and have good experiences. They were able to build relations with colleagues in other departments and agencies, whom they could reach out to even when I wasn't around or we weren't having a meeting. They could pick up the phone and obtain information and get something through. And the second reason that I thought it was so important was that these were people. And we've talked a lot about technology. But these are people, and a couple of people, like in the first panel, there have been some references to people. People is what's going to make it work. The it is the IT stuff, and you can have all of this elaborate developments, most of which I'm not very good at. But you've got to have the right people at the table. People really, really make a difference. One of the things that the people did, even beyond DDM's office, was we created and developed firstgov.gov. That came during our tenure, and that was the product of two different phenomena. One, people stepping outside their role. Bill Lynn at Defense, I remember. He wasn't going to be just the deputy director of Defense. He was going to figure out how to make this system work. And David Barron from GSA. And these were people at agencies who pulled it together and worked together and created something. And interestingly enough, the idea came to President Clinton from the private sector. And it wasn't rejected, it was embraced. So I thought the origins of FirstGov really brought together all the things that I think are important to get us to where we want to be in 2040, which is the people leaving their little silos and talking to one another as human beings, sharing expertise with the right willpower to figure out how to make the budgets work and depart from the status quo and move forward. I've talked too long.
That's excellent. Clay, what was your major accomplishment, and what does it do in terms of shaping how future DDMs should work?
Well, I think one thing, I was deputy director for management for 6 years, not 3. I really liked that job. I mean, if you like being in the middle of it and try to make things work better, oh my goodness. What is it, DOD, what they call a target-rich environment. I asked to be put over there after 2 years. Bush president said, what do you want to, time to move out of personnel or whatever. And I said, well, I don't like this DDM thing. And he said, what? I said, just trust me. Yes, So the management agenda, the architecture for what we did for the 6 years I was there was developed by Mitch Daniels and Sean O'Keefe and Mark Everson. And it was so well thought out and so well put together. Now, Robert Shea and Danny Werfel and I and Karen Evans and David Sababian and others raised this small infant to be a fine adult, if I do say so myself. And we accomplished a lot of things in all the different areas, and big chunks of bad things got off the high-risk list. And anyway, so that's not the accomplishment. It was the way it was designed to be done that made it successful, and I think is a huge lesson for DDMs of the future. One of them is it was not done as a separate deal. It's some deal across the street from OMB where a bunch of smart people were going to figure out how the government ought to work and then go in and do it to the different agencies. You need to do it this way instead of that way, and so forth. It was done within OMB. So most intelligently and brilliantly it was done within the RMOs at OMB. And I heard someone say one of the most important facts of fiscal life is everybody wants their budget officer to be really happy. And so if the budget officer for their agency was involved in the management programs, they were going to be paying a lot of attention at the agencies to what the management folks wanted done, and because it would have and was almost certain to have a lot to say in what kind of budget they got. So it was done in the RMOs. We worked through apparati that already existed. We worked through the COOs and the agencies, the deputy directors, the President's Management Council, so forth and so on. And we realized that the key was we were here to help the agencies be successful, not the other way around. We were, and realized that Mitch and others realized that nobody wanted the government to work better and these agencies work better than the employees of those agencies. They work there. They don't get to say after 2 years, enjoyed the stay, moving on. No, they're there and they want it to work. And then with that, so with a credible team of members on the thing, i.e. people that already exist at OMB, the kind of 4 key focuses were outcomes. What are we trying to do? There was a lot of talk, there were some references in this previous panel about we want to spread technology to, no, we don't spread technology. The desired outcome sucks the technology out of the technology world. Putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade, sucked all the various solutions required to put a man on the moon to get it done by it. So the IT people and the scientists weren't saying, well, how can we spread the physics to make, no. That was stuck up there. And so starting with a desired outcome and working backwards. And then to drive behavior, lots of attention to what are we trying to accomplish this next quarter? What are we trying to accomplish 4 quarters from now? And then, oh, by the way, every quarter, how are we doing? Are we have we moved yet from a bad state of affairs to a medium state of affairs to a good state of affairs? Did we do last quarter what we said we were going to do? One of the questions was, how can we, in the previous panel was, how do we ensure that there is movement, that we move forward, that we address some of these things? People are skeptical. Well, you have to have a very graphic, just overpowering picture of success. What do we want the Department of Homeland Security to look like a year after it was created? What do we want to be happening in the Port of New Orleans? And the picture was created, and that's what they set out to accomplish. So the technology is important, the science is important, but it's the picture of success and the commitment to making that work that drives the behavior and how those things come together. And so that, to a great degree, existed in in the Bush 43 administration for those 6 years. Now, and so we were very full of ourselves at the end of this period of time, and we were having President Bush met with the President Management Council at least every year. One year I think they met twice. And we were bragging about the green this and all this stuff, and he was being very complimentary, very complimentary. And at the end he said, well, Clay, I really like green. I get the impression green's better than yellow, and yellow's better than red. And this is really, you went from all red to this is really, really good. But let me ask you, with all this technology, with all the IT you've got and all the competitive sourcing and all the regular, the year-round attention you have to your financial management and all this kind of stuff, are the American people better off? And how much better off are they? What sort of level of service were we providing the American people in this area or that area there, and what is it now? There was a silence in that room, more deafening than this one right here, even more deafening, because we looked at each other and I said, sir, we have to admit, I can't answer that question. I'm afraid the answer is unacceptable. So I went to a couple of deputy directors after that next week, and I said, all right, you're the greenest agency we got, la-da-da, la-da-da. What departments in your thing work demonstrably, quantifiably better? And they couldn't tell me. So it's the desired outcome, and the outcome is not ultimate. As a means to the end, has to be how much more technology and how much better finances and how many fewer audit opinions and so forth do we have. But the main thing is, how is our performance? A really, really clear definition of performance, and really honest about how we're making that better. Honest with ourselves and honest with the American people, our customers. So I feel like we got that. We didn't get it as great as we thought we got it. So there's still opportunity. But that, to me, was what we grasped a hold of, I think, maybe more than had been grasped a hold of before and maybe since. Maybe as much as has ever been grasped upon since. But that's the key, I think, going forward.
Andrew, what about you? What was your accomplishment, and what does that teach future leaders?
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here today. I want to thank the IBM Center, not only for today's event, but also for the rigor and the data-driven approach that you all bring to this important topic. And I do want to say how nice it is to be with the folks on the panel. I've gotten the opportunity to get to know Margaret a little bit through her new job. Clay was instrumental as we plotted the transition from the last administration to this one. It was a great bipartisan effort together. And Sally and I go back to the Clinton administration, so it's a great group to be here today. And I'm a little jealous, too, because when I took over the DDM role, I wanted to go speak with my predecessors. And I got into the office, into the job, and it took over. And Margaret's here, a year plus into the job. Now she has 2 jobs, but she has this opportunity to hear from us, so I'm a little jealous of that fact. I, like Sally, certainly have the response as to my accomplishment is definitely what we accomplished, and very much what we accomplished, in that the example I'd like to cite occurred over a number of years and over a few DDMs. And that's the U.S. Digital Services. I think it's a great example of a number of things. I mean, what we were trying to achieve was to bring cutting-edge talent into the government, in short-term and long-term, to get on top of the most pressing issues. And I think we made a lot of progress on that, but it was a hack for a number of things. It was a hiring hack. It was a tech hack. It was a bring youth to government hack. It was a hack for OMB in its best role as a partner and a resource provider to the agencies versus a finger wagger and a nudge to the agencies. So I think that, throughout those different perspectives, we had the opportunity to develop something that was real and sustainable and had a lot of impact. And when I cite those things, I just set a few points of data and facts around it. From a hiring perspective, we had the opportunity, in part because we not only brought in technologists, but we brought in professionals in technology hiring to bring them on board. And I had an opportunity again in my later tenure for USDS to watch the curve fall from the classic, 6 months from start talking to a candidate to the time they're in the chair, if that, to USDS being able to be 6 weeks out with all the interviews and the security and all those pieces. We're able to compress that following the rules of government to a very short time frame. I got to see, as we talked with Partnership for Public Service and others about the importance of bringing younger people into government, it was an opportunity to bring people who were not wearing the suits, but the hoodies into government, and that infusion, which I think was really helpful for some of these more staid settings. I think on the substance, and it generated from the catastrophe that was healthcare.gov. It brought some of the best and the brightest from a technical edge into government. And was able to seed that around government when it's become, I think, harder to stay on top and stay abreast of the latest in technology. So it was able to solve that issue as well. And I think from the partnership versus the nudge and the finger wagging perspective, I mean, those were certainly the most fulfilling parts of my time at OMB. There was plenty of finger wagging that went on, and asking agencies if they had their stuff together. But we had an opportunity to pull these resources together, create this unit, and then farm them out and seed them out into the agencies on our dollars. And then the agencies, after proof of concept, then go build their own with our dollars and their dollars in places like DOD and DHS and SBA and throughout government, VA, after that proof of concept. That was a unique place to be, I think, in OMB land, to really partner hand in hand with that, with the resources as well as the concepts and pushing from a leadership perspective. So those are among the things that I think of. I think this was a difficult question because I do think of this selection as selecting amongst one's children. And there are a lot of other things that I think we accomplished in our time that I'm very proud of, and the team's really proud of, that I would cite had we had more time and I had more choices. Thank you.
Margaret, you're right in the midst of this.
I'm right in the middle of it. Well, thanks for the question, and I actually want to thank the folks who've been in my chair before, because I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I'm privileged to have had their experience and the capabilities and vehicles that they've left behind as tools for where we are now and what we're doing. And I would say if I think about what I have been able to bring, it's been enabled by all of these things. And really, I think it's the folks who have been to my office know I have tapestries in my office because there's a lot of wall space and I didn't like the color in the office and all this stuff. And so I brought these tapestries. And what I think about what we've done with the President's Management Agenda, the reorganization plan, the cross-agency priority goals, and all of the vehicles, whether it's the Technology Modernization Fund or our proposed people fund that we're proposing for the workforce, that we've been able to weave together a number of very complicated concepts and tools into a tapestry that helps provide clarity to leadership at agencies and therefore to the teams at all the agencies about what are the priorities that we have from a mission, service, and stewardship standpoint. To Clay's earlier point about the outcome that we want is mission. It's not IT. It's not, some esoteric concepts that, I heard very recently somebody saying, OMB, the most boring people you could ever imagine. It was really recent, by the way, that I heard that. Why do the American people care about any of that stuff? Well, they actually don't, in the same way that I don't really care about how my plumbing works, right? Unless it doesn't work. In which case, I want to know I've got the best plumbers who can get into my house, get access to my hot water heater, whatever the issue is, and be able to address it. And I think we've got a lot of great vehicles that have been put together. So we've got governance vehicles. I've got all these councils that I can call on to pull people together. And I've got teammates, both career and political, who work with the heads of all of those organizations. And I've got teammates at OMB that brought all the great work that had already been happening and helped me connect with what are the root causes that are preventing us from going further. So I tend to have a management style that is not top-down or bottom-up. I call it sandwich. It's both. How do you take the best of the bottom-up but put some vision and some framework over the top? And maybe the thing that I feel most excited about, and I'd actually defer to some of my colleagues from OMB itself about whether this has been successful, but talking about outcomes in terms of storytelling is something we tried to do in the President's Management Agenda, in the reorganization, and frankly, in every presentation that I talk about. So when I use my plumbing analogy, I'm trying to remind people that IT isn't the end, it's a delivery vehicle. And our workforce is part of a service delivery model to the American people. So what's really important is what's on the front page of the PMA, the people we serve, whether they're veterans or students or retirees or vulnerable families. That's who we're serving. And all of this needs to connect. And maybe the most important thing about the storytelling is the fact that what really changes action on the ground, and most importantly out in the country, not here in Washington, isn't the ink on the paper. It isn't the law or the reg itself. It's the people implementing the law or reg to the benefit of the American people. And that requires the very complicated disciplines of procurement and IT and data and people to all work together to drive outcomes that my mother in upstate New York cares about. So I feel deeply grateful to all the work that's gone before, both by political leadership and by the career folks that I get to work with, many of whom are here, to do that. So I feel like I'm getting to play with all these awesome tools and just go out and hopefully make a difference.
Well, Sally, what advice, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have for Margaret and future DDMs to help them be successful in their job?
I would urge Margaret and her successors to think about something she said, which is it's not top down and bottom up, it's both. And I want to expand on that a little bit to say the bottomed up is critically important. I think OMB is uniquely situated to provide conventional wisdom to sometimes unconventional senior people, to say exactly what could or should be done, mainly by saying what was done in the past, or taking your idea, say, we tried that once, and it failed miserably. Well, that doesn't mean you have to abandon your idea, but it does mean you have to come to grips with the sources of the failure, and you can learn from that. So I think the thing that I did when I was in the Obama transition was to preach nonstop, listen to the civil service, for God's sake. To listen to them and bring them in and ask them questions and listen to the, I was boring. Because I kept saying the same thing, but I think it's really critically important. And when I say top down, I think you really need to enlist the top. Vice President Gore was doing the reinventing government. But we managed to get the president involved a couple of times. Actually, a lot of times. He was interested, and every single entry by him was salutary. Every single one helped. It sent a message that this is not some, we're reinventing, I don't want to use that expression, we're changing the way we're doing business yet again. It was, this is important, here's the objective, and I'm behind it. And President Bush coming to the PMC, we started with the PMC, and we had a lot of good experiences with that. But having enlisting the president can be critically important. There is a downside. I would just warn you, once we got him so excited about something that he ran with it. Right off the edge. And I think it was my lack of fully briefing him, and certainly the papers that I had given, and he just, and I just watched with my mouth dropping open. So it does take a little bit more time, because it's important to make sure that he understands what's at stake. But getting his aid is really significant. So I top up, bottom down, carry on.
Clay, what about you? Do you ever have the president take him to the edge?
Well, I think I want to just elaborate on points I made earlier. It's about outcomes. And the way I think about doing it involving OMB, you do it with OMB, you don't do it to OMB, so you do it through OMB. And you do it with the agencies, not to the agencies. You're not going to go into a 200,000 or a 700,000 person organization and say, listen up, fellas, boys and girls, I know how this agency ought to work. No, that's not going to happen. There was talk, the previous panel was asked to vote on 1 to 5, what do you think 2040 is going to be like? And I don't remember his name, the fellow that's in, was told me he gave it a 5, and he said the reason he gave it a 5 was he says it's disaster if it's not a 5. We deserve a 5. The question was, though, do we think we can make it a 5? The picture of success or the picture of not working on it properly isn't clear enough for people. Mm-hmm. That's the challenge for future leaders. And then on the management side, the management person at DDM at OMB, the senior management person in the federal government, to make sure that the president is painting a clear enough picture about what happens if we keep on keeping on. Mm-hmm. And because we're toast as a country in 20 years, financially, performance-wise, and just everything. And I don't think that's wild exaggeration. And so we got to say, this is here's a picture that, a man not on the moon by the end of the decade. Everybody, ho, ho, hum. A government not fixed by 2040 is not a pretty picture. And what would be then a picture of mutually agreeable, easy to say, hard to do, realistically aggressive, not ideal, but a picture that it could be. What is possible? We don't know exactly how yet, but what is possible, and then have that suck the solutions out of us, pull the solutions out of us. And then once we promise that, once the current and future governments focus on that, and it's put in law so that if the next administration wants to change it, they can, but they got to go through boys up on the hill to change it formally, as opposed to just issue a new document. And then there's transparency and accountability for actually getting us in that direction. Real easy to say sitting here, really hard to do. But unless those 2 or 3 things happen, it's just yakking. We can talk about, well, we didn't have enough IT, or we didn't have no. If the picture of success is, if it doesn't happen, it's really ugly. And what's a realistically version of what could happen, and let's go make that happen. It's the will, it's the picture of success, it's the desired outcome. Go get them, Margaret.
What about you, Andrew?
I'd add to that a couple things. One, I'd say be creative, and be creative also teeing up a comment that Sally made by embracing your career colleagues in particular as you work with them on the creative ideas. And I go back to the USDS example, and that one could have planned and drafted legislation and a whole detailed approach to this concept, and then put it in a budget and went and asked Congress for the money and maybe some authorizing legislation to go try to pursue this thing, or one could go do it with an existing authority. But one had to look at that authority, one had to go to OPM and find the right kind of hiring authorities that were existent, and put all these pieces together to create out of basically whole cloth this group of 200 plus technologists that came in overnight and worked for a couple years. And then as we found out over that time period, that concept was validated by Congress bringing more money to the table as they did their work, and Congress bringing even broader authority through the form of legislation for that. But I think the kind of creativity that the OMB team plus a number of our friends from OSTP showed in the origin of that unit to really press on all the authorities and all the funding that we had at our fingertips that we would not be thinking of in a conventional setting to make that happen is extremely important. And that happened time and time again. So I'd say, push the envelope on that. And it goes to a related charge I would share, which is the classic one: don't let a good crisis go to waste. Okay. So the things that we were able to do, and the USDS piece for the last time, you could have sort of fixed healthcare.gov and said, okay, that was nice, let's try to not talk about that again and move on. Or you could draw the lessons from that and then seek to replicate those throughout government, so you avoided other healthcare.govs, and you were able to work on forward-leaning opportunities instead of just crisis management. That came up again in the form of OPM and the cyber breach that occurred there, is that OMB in its finger-wagging, nudging way had been saying to agencies, you really need to get your security in order, you really need to get your security in order, and they had been ignoring OMB's DDM and CIO for some time, and then what occurred at OPM gave this not only opportunity to go try and address the crisis that had become OPM cyber breach, but make sure that everybody, at least in the major agencies, if not all agencies, up their cyber game in a significant way. So I think really leaning into those, not for just the crisis that they create, and they all come right to the jobs, but really leveraging them. And I think the last thing I'd say is I had this management approach early on in the job where I think my view of how things worked in the White House was that, important issues would come up with the chief of staff and he'd hand the ball to various people to go run with them. And so my focus was a little more myopic and like, okay, here's my ball and I'll go run with that. And there were plenty of balls to go around. I generally stayed with mine. And what I came to understand and to do more of in the DDM job, thanks to my predecessors, was to work with my senior colleagues throughout the White House and the agencies to really push key issues, particularly the cross-agency priorities, with that leadership. So I was in the room occupying a lot of senior management time amongst the 3, 4, 5 of us, but we were picking the 3 or 4 issues that we could really make some progress on. And I think it was perhaps only because we had that much weight pushing on that particular issue that we were able to make progress on things like open data because of the kind of collaboration that was happening at that level.
Margaret, what about you? Is there been a big surprise to you in taking on this job and what it entails?
I think the biggest pleasant surprise has been how much appetite for change there is in our workforce. And I literally was at a speaking event this morning where a woman named Robin came up to me. I don't know what agency she worked for. And she was just like giddy, and she hugged me because I mean, I was talking about open data.
Ooh.
And,
Whoa, an open data hug.
Super, yeah, so exciting. I did mention Pokemon Go, so, I had that going, but, I don't know, if we can connect to the power of 2.1 million civilian workers in our workforce who are dedicated, have passed our background investigations, and have been here and know all the problems and know exactly what we know, which is what Clay said, that if I look at the kind of moonshot questions, can we keep our elections safe? Can we keep our people safe, if we don't have a clear-eyed view about cyber risks? Can we keep what I call the entitlement Pac-Man that eats discretionary spending from crowding out all spending on civilian activities? Can we do that without growing the economy? We have to enable the power of the people in government, because they're our best brand actors. They're our best storytellers. They are the emblems of what we're all trying to do. And we did something, Mark Busso from my team is here somewhere, a team of career folks came up with, we were talking about celebrating mission, service, and stewardship, and somebody at GSA that's working with Mark came up with the idea of doing Fed Fashion Week. Does that sound crazy? Ooh, totally crazy, right? So New York Fashion Week, big thing, lots of people in the country pay attention to it. And this team came up with the idea of, let's showcase the clothing that keeps our military safe, that keeps our astronauts, effective at maintaining the space stations, keeping forest firefighters, on the job, keeping scientists, doing the research to look at Zika and help protect the homeland. Let's highlight that. And it was cute and it was creative, and we got hits to, wait for it, performance.gov, right? The wonkiest thing ever, where all of our data that you all have been working hard to get published is on performance.gov. And because of Fed Fashion Week, more Americans got to see it. And by the way, more federal workers were jazzed that they were being featured, and the Park Service started doing their own thing. That's something that I feel intensely excited about, that technology has enabled us to go from broadcast media to interactive media. We can do the same thing if we kind of do this sandwich strategy. We put vision out front, we talk about challenges and tools, and then we get our advocates in government, you know, the people who have that appetite for change, who want to make this the government for the 21st century, like let's harness that. And you know, like the lawyers will be like nuts when I say this, but like let's set them loose to like solve problems.
Sally, you had some reactions.
Well, I was listening to my colleagues talk, and it occurred to me that one thing that wasn't said is to prioritize. What I've heard from both panels is universal improvement, universal excellence, universal programs, whatever. And I'm reminded that when I became the administrator of OIRA, Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs at OMB, Doug Costel, who had been in the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, came to see me and he said, just one thing, write down on a piece of paper when I leave your office 2 or 3 things you would really like to accomplish. Put it in your center drawer. And every morning when you come in, open your center drawer, look at what you've written down, because otherwise, as Andrew said, you get distracted by doing the job. You get pulled in 1,000 different directions. You get eaten by the alligators who are snapping at your heels or ankles or whatever alligators snap at. But in any event, I think it's essential to prioritize, which doesn't mean other things get to go downhill. But where's the emphasis on which syllable? Just nail it. Say, this is what we're working for. And I think prioritization would help a lot.
Clay?
I would go even further than that.
Go, Guy, go. Yeah, go.
It's like, it would be, rather than keep it in the desk drawer, we're working on this. And we want to get this done. We think it's reasonably acceptable, reasonably possible that we can make this happen and we want to commit to make it happen in 3 years or a year and a half or whatever. And we hope we think we can be here after a year and after 2. And we're going to report back to you for every 6 months or a quarter or something. And we had senior people in our own administration, who shall remain nameless, say, why do we want to tell people what we're not doing particularly well? My answer was, did you miss 8th grade civics? You know, the light of day, democracy, you know, it's like, and that's it. You got to turn the lights on and deal with what's for real, not what, you know, is unrealistic or what people are not doing. You have to drive behavior, and so that's why it's not clear enough where we're headed and what doesn't work and what does work and what do we want to be at the end of the decade, at the end of the 20-year decade that went by decade or whatever, duo decade, anyway, in 2040.
Well, transitioning out is an inevitable fact of life for every administration. Should the efforts of transitioning out institutionalize the management agenda and the management framework? Or, in other words, what have you learned about what you left behind and what the future administration should do? Clay?
One of my big disappointments was me, because I was asked by a lot of reporters at the end of the Bush 43 administration, you know, you all have accomplished a lot. Are you fearful that it's going to go away, that the new broom will come in and want to sweep it clean? I said, no, I'm not uncomfortable at all. I said, the employees, if you attend these celebrations when they get to green or when they get off the high risk list or they get to green or whatever, and they're so excited about what they've been proud of what they've done, the employees won't let it happen. Just a complete idiocy. I mean, every new broom is going to sweep clean. And so, I don't know how you keep the fire burning, but it's not enough for an administration to say, this is the official thing for this administration and toss them a manual. I don't know whether it has to be done by Congress, and so if they want the goals to change or what the commitments are 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out, the formal commitments, then it has to go through Congress or not. But Congress is not interested very much in management by objective.
No.
Yeah, but I would jump in here and say, I think we have to earn it. And what I mean by that is, I guess, surprised some people in Washington when we didn't kill USDS, or we didn't look a gift horse in the mouth around modernizing government technology and a lot of the things accomplished in the Obama administration. Why would I do that? That would be an utter and complete waste, because they were super valuable tools that give us frameworks. And in some cases, they're legislative frameworks. And, we got authorized all kinds of money, but Congress is still holding us hostage. I'm joking, of course.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. There are other things like U.S. Digital Service that, of course, we're going to keep doing. Well, maybe not, of course. But I think, what we tried to do in articulating the president's management agenda and the reorg agenda in very lay people's terms and in the framework where we're really speaking to the American people, we tried to lay out a case for change and a case for specific actions that can't get forgotten. So even if a new political, wind sweeps in, as it does, because we have quadrennial elections and that's how we express the will of the American people, it is the purview of a new administration to change course, but not to do something foolish, not to do something that the American people would say, why'd you do that? That's dumb. That, I think, is how I think I'm trying to hold myself accountable. If the work product that we have is good enough, that the next administration, no matter what flavor, sees the value in it, maybe they'll throw some of it out, as is their right.
Or tweak it.
Or tweak it, or build on it and make it better. But to me, that's how it works in business.
Well,
Sally?
so I was part of the transition out from Clinton. But more importantly, for the purposes of this answer, I was very active in the transition in for Obama. And I want to say that Josh Bolten and the George W. administration were phenomenal in setting a high bar of cooperation and communication. And so I can't answer your question, Jonathan, about whether you should make it definitive. Here's the man, somehow make it immovable, or I'm not sure what verb you used when you asked the question. But I think it's important that the outgoing administration be clear as to what they were trying to accomplish, how they were going about it, the strengths and weaknesses of the approaches that they were using, and that the incoming administration, which, as Margaret says, has the right to throw it all to one side, listen, a word I used earlier, and maybe welcome that information. There were, unfortunately, 2 years ago, a fair amount of landing teams, as they were called, that wasn't interested in listening to what the previous administration had done. And it's not that they threw things out, although they did do that, but they also didn't learn from the expertise that had been accumulated. But again, I want to just applaud Clay's administration. They were phenomenal and clearly set the tone so that when the Obama administration was planning its outgoing to the Trump administration, that was the standard they were looking to. So thanks.
Well, thank you. It was President Bush's charge.
It came
There
through.
was underlings.
See, I said get it from the top.
He said, I want this to be the very best, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a very clear picture of success. Maybe it's not, you don't say, here's the management agenda. Maybe they're trying to formalize and say, here are the official, it's a sort of stupid idea, but better than the other stupid ideas I've had. maybe here are the official, what we want to be in 2040, 2030, and here's our long-term goals and our thinking about budget and stuff. And we think this is the way it ought to be based on what we know now.
Yeah.
And so then if they want to say, well, no, I have a different view of 2040, it's going to be bleaker than that or more robust than that, then you change that and you sort of thump them. But you just can't come up and, without just on your own, say, well, no, that's all irrelevant. We don't need to reduce 25% what we're spending on things. We don't need to get 50% better at this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I actually would say that I feel privileged as well because I got that informally. You know, it didn't have to be institutionalized. There is a community of former DDMs that have made it utterly clear that they are available to be of assistance, and it is incredibly inclusive. I think there's a community of folks in the good government arena that have been very helpful at providing insight and perspective. And, you know, personally, it makes me feel good in a time of divisive political rhetoric to see the level of collaboration I see among the folks on the management agenda side. It gives me great hope.
It's the stuff that the partnership does also on transitions. It's
Right.
like mind-boggling.
That was the point I was going to add, Jonathan, is that that's probably, I think it's about balance, and I think the balance that was struck between the thou shalt of legislation or more formal approach to a framework and process is where one needs to be, and you saw that in exactly in the transition where President Bush and Clay and his team ran a superb transition. The partnership picked up on that. They asked Congress to make statutory some of that, very sort of bare bones of that. And then for us to, as we came after them, to fill it in, and I think that was a good push that we got formally, and then we had a great collaboration informally, as Margaret's pointing out. So I think you hit that balance by setting out some frameworks and some process, but you leave the substance to stand for itself. Also, as Margaret said, I think that's the way we felt from a DDM handoff perspective, is that we were proud of the work that we had done, career and political. We stood by it, and we expected, well, we hoped that they would share much of that view, and we've seen, as Margaret just said, that was indeed the case. We also expected their own stamp and their own views to come in, and we've seen both of those. So I think it's also that matter of like doing the best you can, running a rigorous, as Sally said, handoff with those who come, informally and formally, and then the results will flow.
Well, I got a number of questions from the audience, and we can't get to all of them, but there's a note of skepticism in this one, which is on the top of the list, so I'll read it and see what we can do. It says, for the 3 prior DDMs, so I guess this leaves you off the hook, Margaret, for advice, advice for Margaret and the audience. Quote, you've had some opportunity to reflect. Have the rules changed for how we make progress? What are the lessons we are needing to learn nowadays? I guess they're suggesting that, number one, that things are different, or implied in that things are different these days, and how are they different?
No, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. No one cared that much about management. No one still cares that much about management.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a problem. I thought Margaret captured it when she said management is not like what's driving the divisive political debates now. I mean, this is, I've seen polarization. I've never seen polarization. I'm the oldest one on the panel, so I get to say this. I've never seen polarization like we have today. I've never seen distrust like we've had today. I've never seen cynicism as I've seen today. But it's not on the management agenda, for God's sake. And,
Exactly.
and so I think if you sort of keep your head down, then you just keep working. Well, it's not. Don't go there.
People don't ask their plumbers what their politics are. I mean,
Yeah, you don't. You clearly don't.
I think on that note, we might quit because that's a pretty positive note. And I want to thank the panel.
for all of your service. Thank you.
And Dan, thank you.
Okay.
Fun.
I get to go teach.
Do you want us to?
You want us to leave?
No?
Leave.
Stay there, you can
Adios.
leave.
Yeah, I have to go teach.
Okay, go
Unfortunately.
teach.
Or fortunately.
Thank you very
I love
much.
doing.
Appreciate it. I've been asked to wrap up the session here today. I think in part because I'm sort of the institutional memory for a lot of what's gone on at the IBM Center, and I've spanned the leadership of all three executive directors here. And I'd like to focus on three things that I see in some perspective. One is around research, one is around impact, and the other is around connection. In terms of research, we've focused on how do we bring research from academics to practice. And we've produced nearly 380 reports on topics dealing from leadership to technology to performance and analytics and collaboration and social media and engagement. And the thing that's really heartened me to see is how this has influenced or contributed to the careers of a lot of the academics and bringing them into doing research that has an impact. And this brings me to the second theme that I've seen over the years, and that, you know, we talk about impact, and I can't say that this is causal versus corollary, but in nothing else, the research is at least inspirational. And if you look back at the early years of this center, one of the reports that was done was on what was the role of the President's Management Council. This is when it was in its infancy. And that report helped, I think, in the continuation of the pre-MC as being picked up as an administrative device by the Bush administration, and then the Obama administration thought it's always been around, and then it's sort of crept a bit into statutory lingo. Another is around the impact of, I think, our contributions and research on enterprise risk management that I think contributed to the formalizing this in OMB government-wide guidance. Another was a more concrete thing in that we did a report on how do you blog in government, and at the time when there was less than a dozen blogs in the federal government, and now there's hundreds, and they took off weeks after the report came out. So I'd like to say there's some causality, but we can't share. The work that Shelley Metzenbaum did on what should the vision be of performance management in a future administration. Then the new administration at the time, the Obama administration, basically hired and said, can you do this stuff? And so there were things that led to the implementation of the government-wide, or the GPRA Modernization Act. Some of the ideas that she had there, things around collaboration that Jane Fountain had written about that we think contributed to the cross-agency priority goal system. The work that Inez Mergel did on digital services and innovation offices, and her testimony in front of the German parliament on this kind of stuff. So our work is sort of reaching out, and I think that we're looking forward to things around strategic foresight and the use of AI. The thing that we found is the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed, as someone said. And this brings me to the connecting, that the IBM Center has served a role as a catalyst, as a neutral convener. Some years ago, the Defense Department was having trouble in its transformation efforts, and we served as a quiet convener on some of that work that led to some of their business transformation agency initiatives. Another is in the stand-up of the National Background Investigation Bureau, as what are some of the lessons learned of creating a new agency. We did some work on the 2008 and 2016 transitions that we think helped connect people. So this notion of doing work that helps connect, I think, is a continuing thing. And I would like to say that we'll continue this connecting as we leave here. There's the books that we've been talking about, but there's a reception upstairs where we can continue our connecting. So turn it back over to Dan, or do we just go?
I don't want to stand in the way of people and food and drink, so thank you very much for coming.